Now, like many of you guys, I thought I'd take a look at that BBC debate the other night involving all the political parties, well, most of them anyway. And I knew from the start it would be an anti-Nigel Farage hit job by the BBC because it's, after all, the BBC. The BBC are far more inclined to side with and elevate a political party that wants to screw this country over. Anyway, that's another video for another time. But I observed a few interesting points about this debate, which in my opinion confirms to me that Reform are on the right track. Now, firstly, it's the after-debate poll conducted by the BBC itself, and shockingly, the results came back saying that the person dominating that whole show was Nigel Farage, and that was a BBC poll. And secondly, why on earth were Plaid Cymru and the SNP doing on it? Plaid Cymru nor the SNP have absolutely no hope whatsoever of getting anyone into Downing Street. The SNP guy, well, he just gave his usual pro-immigration rhetoric. And the Plaid Cymru leader, Rhyn ap Iorwerth, he was another waste of space as well. I mean, he said nothing of substance. And every time he spoke, he just gave a snidey remark about Nigel Farage. And Farage at one point put him right in his place, because the guy accused him of going over there for a photo op when Nigel Farage pointed out that he had actually raised over £100,000 to help veterans make their way over there. And at least Nigel Farage was there, unlike him. And that's the thing with sneering Welsh nationalists like Rhyn ap Iorwerth. They're the ones really pushing divisive politics. He just turned up at this debate to call Nigel Farage names, and that was it. That was his chance, and he got it. 15 minutes of fame, and now he's gone. Forever to be forgotten. And then there's the weird relationship between Angela Rayner and Penny Mordaunt. You could see them throughout the whole debate, looking daggers at each other, aggressively pointing at each other, shouting each other down, giving each other dirty looks, and then when it was over and they thought the cameras had stopped, they were like best buddies. It's just like WWE wrestling. In the ring and in front of the camera, they are mortal enemies, but backstage, they're all mates. It's just theatre. And proves once again that with their display there, both the Labour and Tories are two cheeks of the same arse. And then there was the Green Party Pixie, someone who clearly doesn't believe her politics, otherwise she wouldn't have had to read off her own cue card every time she was asked a question. And as for the Lib Dem representative, well, she was a Lib Dem, wasn't she? And they're never worth talking about. But the most interesting point for me was the BBC audience. Now we know, and I know myself, having watched Question Time and other political shows produced by the BBC, they are incredibly, incredibly biased. During the whole of the Brexit campaign, every Question Time audience were filled to the brim with Ramonas. And it's the same when they host leadership and general election debates. Most of the audience they round up are left-wing biased, are more likely to vote for Labour. And it was no difference with this audience. Take this fellow, for example. Now, he was sat right in the front. And every time Nigel Farage said something, the camera would conveniently pan over to this guy, and on cue, he would shake his head disapprovingly. And at one point, you could see him looking at the camera, waiting for his cue, and then turn to shake his head disapprovingly at Nigel Farage. The guy was an obvious plant if ever I saw one. And it was always the three members of the audience as well. And all three of them shook their heads when Nigel Farage made a point. So this is what you get with the BBC. You don't get fairness, you don't get balance. What you get are partisan hit jobs, and this was an attempt of a partisan hit job on Nigel Farage, but it didn't do well, did it? Because even their own poll afterwards said that he won that debate hands down. And he held his own as well. And as he pointed out at the end, unlike the other people on stage, he believes in what he says and he didn't need an auto cue. And this is yet another excuse to bin your television licence fees because they're not worth it. If you are patriotic, if you love this country, if you voted for Brexit, if you believe in Donald Trump, and if you are going to vote for the Conservatives or Reform especially, the BBC hates you. That's a fact. And there we go. I'm Paz49. Thanks for listening. And until the next time, Roger Trout.